James had always considered himself a man who believed in clarity, a man who prided himself on seeing situations as they were, without exaggeration or drama. Life had always followed a predictable rhythm for him: work, home, quiet evenings and weekends with Claire. Their marriage had spanned 7 years, and though it wasn't perfect, James had never questioned the foundation they'd built together. But that evening at the office holiday party, all the certainty he had leaned on for years began to unravel. The hotel's grand ballroom was adorned with shimmering lights, festive garlands, and the low hum of conversation that seemed almost detached from James' own world. Claire had insisted he come along, claiming she wanted him to meet her colleagues and enjoy the celebration together. On the surface, it appeared ordinary, but James couldn't shake the unease that had been creeping into his chest for weeks. Claire's behavior had subtly shifted: late nights at work, secretive phone calls, and that faint, elusive tension he could never fully articulate. He told himself he might be imagining things. Maybe it was just the stress of her promotion, the added responsibilities at her firm. Maybe he was reading too much into coincidences. Yet, as they entered the room, the first jolt of recognition hit him. The way she moved, the laughter that wasn't quite hers, the way she scanned the room for familiar faces with a certain intensity, it was different. Claire's eyes sparkled, but not in the way they had when she was simply happy. There was calculation behind the brightness. And then he saw him, Adam. A man whose presence seemed to dominate the space, leaning close to Claire, whispering, laughing, too close too easily. James froze, a pang of disorientation striking him. The casual ease with which Claire allowed him near was foreign, unfamiliar, and utterly unsettling. Claire noticed James standing by the entrance, a polite smile spreading across her face. But the subtle flicker in her eyes betrayed something else: anticipation, excitement, something he didn't recognize anymore. "James, come join us," she said, her voice light, but there was an edge to it that made James pause. He nodded, forcing a smile that felt like a mask, and approached. The closer he got, the clearer it became that something had changed in the dynamics of their marriage. The intimacy he had once shared with Claire, the trust, the unspoken understanding, seemed like it had evaporated, leaving behind only fragments of familiarity. Adam noticed him too, and the smirk that crossed his face was deliberate, measured. "Hey man," Adam said, voice casual but tinged with something James couldn't quite place. "Didn't see you there. Claire and I were just catching up." The words were simple, yet every syllable carried a weight of challenge and unspoken provocation. James' fists clenched, his pulse quickening, but he kept his posture controlled, refusing to let the anger dictate his movements. This was a moment of clarity, not confrontation. He needed to observe, to understand what had quietly shifted behind his back. Claire, laughing at something Adam said, brushed past James, her hand lightly touching his arm in a gesture that felt rehearsed, almost calculated. The touch, which once might have comforted him, now ignited a flare of suspicion. He remembered the small signs, the late nights, the phone pressed tightly to her side, the way she had laughed a little too brightly when mentioning Adam's name during their conversations. Every memory replayed itself with an intensity he hadn't felt before. This wasn't imagination, it was pattern recognition, a sequence of actions that pointed to a reality he wasn't ready to confront. He drifted behind them, observing without intervening. The crowd around them seemed to blur, fading into background noise as his focus narrowed. He saw them lean together slightly, their conversation intimate yet subtle, casual yet charged with an energy that wasn't appropriate for what he had considered a loyal marriage. Each glance between them, each small gesture, acted as a confirmation of the suspicions that had quietly gnawed at him for weeks. James' mind raced, trying to find rational explanations, but the evidence piled up relentlessly, undeniable and heavy. For a fleeting moment, he questioned his own judgment. Maybe it was a misunderstanding, a coincidence, a moment of misplaced closeness. Yet deep down he knew that the shift was real, tangible, and irreversible. Claire's body language, her voice, the laughter that didn't include him, all spoke a language he could no longer ignore. The realization was brutal, a slow burn that set his nerves alight. He wasn't angry yet, anger required certainty. What he felt now was something more primordial: awareness, recognition of a fracture that had been carefully hidden from him. As the night continued, James noticed how other colleagues interacted with Claire. Their deference, the subtle admiration, the familiarity with Adam that seemed unspoken yet omnipresent. It was a pattern of behavior he had missed entirely until now. And Claire, radiant as ever, seemed oblivious to his internal turmoil, engaging fully with the group, her attention fluidly moving between Adam and the others. Every moment amplified the distance between them, the invisible line that had slowly drawn itself over months of concealed behavior. James recalled the small, mundane moments that had previously felt benign. The missed dinners, the vague excuses about late work nights, the casual dismissal when he asked simple questions. Each seemed trivial in isolation. But now, seen in sequence, they formed a coherent narrative, undeniable and clear. The sense of betrayal was no longer abstract. It had shape, form, and weight. It was a physical thing pressing against his chest, making each breath measured, deliberate. The realization that he had been systematically excluded from the truth, from the transparency he had believed in, was devastating. And then it happened. Claire turned, her eyes catching his from across the room, and smiled. But the smile carried a weight, a message he couldn't decipher in its entirety. Adam noticed it too, a subtle acknowledgement of his awareness, yet he made no move to adjust or step back. The dynamics had shifted. James was no longer part of the private narrative that had unfolded between them. The feeling was chilling, suffocating even, as if he had been slowly removed from a story he had believed he was co-authoring. The hum of music, the chatter of the party, the clinking of glasses, all became background noise to the storm brewing silently inside him. A subtle push from Claire, meant perhaps as playful or dismissive, caught him off guard. "This party is for my ex," she smirked, words that landed like a physical blow. The smirk, the casualness, the sheer audacity, it confirmed everything. The party wasn't for friends, for colleagues, or for celebration. It was a stage, a theater, and he had been unwittingly cast as the outsider. His pulse accelerated, yet he remained outwardly composed, a silent observer in the theater of betrayal that had been meticulously arranged.